How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
Wild and massive applause.
Yeah. Woo-hoo. Good times.
It's great. Yeah. How have you been, Mark?
I've been well, Dr. Joe. How have you been?
I've been really well. Gratitude for Thanksgiving coming up. I know it's a major theme of yours and Feel Good Friday. It's always great.
Yes, the month of gratitude. We're going to extend that beyond the month and have hopefully the year of gratitude and then the life of gratitude.
Nice. It's nice. Well, that's music to my ears, and in many ways, that's how we can introduce our guest for tonight, Mark.
Let's do that. Today, Dr. Joe, we have a returning guest, one of our MVP guests, if I don't say so myself. We have Eugene Beresin, MD, professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. He's also the executive director of the Clay Center for Young Healthy Minds at Mass General Hospital. He's consulted to a variety of television shows such as ER and Law and Order SVU, and he's been a guest on the Dr. Joe Show. Welcome, Dr. Beresin.
Well, thanks for having me here. Thanks for having me back.
It is a pleasure. And just so people know, Dr. Beresin has been many, many things, including my training director and mentor way back when. Can I say how far back it was? 93. 1993. Yeah.
Were you the class of 93 or did you start
class of 95?
I thought that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, you were right. We were the first sort of combined MGH McLean class. I think we're one of the first classes.
Let's see. Yes, you were, because it was combined in 1994 is when they came together. So yes, your class was combined.
Amazing. And here we are, still friends.
Yes.
And Dr. Joe, he's an author as well.
He is. And as a matter of fact, this is why we have Dr. Beresin on tonight, because he has authored a remarkable book, which I'm very grateful to have also contributed to, with the wonderful title, Music.
Music.
Yeah.
Music.
What a great title.
So, Gene, can you just tell us about the inspiration for the book and why now? And let's hear about it.
Well, first of all, it's in a series. Emerald Books, and the senior editor is Paul Crawford from the University of Nottingham. He's a professor there and involved with the Institute of Medicine and the International Health Humanities Network. At any rate, he came up with the idea of doing a series on the arts for health, which includes film, photography, singing, dance, and music happens to be one in this series. So it's really, it was really not my idea. He invited me to write this book.
But that's incredible, because I've enjoyed so many times at our American Academy of Child Psychiatry conference listening to you and your band.
Yeah, Pink Floyd and the Transitional Objects.
Which is just the best.
A good enough band. Yeah,
great title.
It is. But you've had an interest in music in a long time. So tell us a little bit about the book and why people would want to read it.
Well, the book, first of all, I redefined, it's called The Arts for Health, but I really wanted to focus on well-being. And because you can be dying, literally, and be in a state of positive well-being through a number of different mechanisms. And one of them is the use of music. So this wonderful guy, Seligman, described well-being in terms of positive emotions, engagement, meaning, accomplishments, and then a few other elements were added, such as physical health, such as the work environment, socioeconomic situations. And then I added the Dalai Lama's notion of happiness, because he said happiness, well-being involves happiness, which means a sound mind, trust, compassion, friendship, and relationships. And I wanted to kind of write about music in relationship to those elements. And then I think the heart and soul of the book was asking for all kinds of folks, doctors, folks in palliative care, folks in music therapy, everyday people, and write about how music improved their sense of well-being. And that's really, I think, the best part of the book. I mean, I also write about how music has been useful in pain management and anxiety and depression and, Parkinson's disease by dancing. And there's lots of great research on this stuff. But what I really wanted was to hear of people's stories, what music really meant to them in their lives, and how it got them through hard times and good times.
Well, how about we hear your story then about music, and how did music affect your life in that way?
Well, my mom was a concert pianist. I dedicated the book to her because, as I said in my dedication, she was my inspiration, but I was no match for her fantasy impromptu. So what I did was, I studied piano at the Philadelphia Conservatory of Music, and then I was a music major in college, picked up the guitar and played at the Philadelphia Folk Festival. And what I did, since I was no competition for her, is I learned how to play by ear. So my godfather, a guy named Davey Cantor, was a stage manager in Philly. And back in those days, the shows would first go on the stage, as at the Schubert. And if they made it, then they went to New York, they went to Broadway. So I got to go backstage for lots and lots of musical comedies, Oklahoma, Fanny, you name it, Pal Joey. And I learned how to play standards by ear. And my mom kept saying, "How do you do that? How do you do that?" And I said, well, how do you play the fantasy impromptu? How do you play Chopin's Revolutionary Etude? I mean, geez, I can't do that. Of course, she practiced 5-6 hours a day. But I learned how to play by ear, and then continued the guitar and the piano since then. And I've been playing, my whole life. And then when I began the Clay Center, because we do podcasts and we do videos, I learned how to write the music for soundtracks. So all of the music for the podcasts, the intro and the outro, because we do it kind of like the Dr. Joe show. We have our own music at the beginning and the end, the bumpers, as it were. I wrote that and wrote a band, and that's the only thing we did in the studio. All the other music for our videos on our YouTube channel, I did the soundtrack. So I would play everything on the keys, including the sitar.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. I just want to come back to the by ear thing, because I had a patient who once said to me, I used to play piano by ear, but now I've started using my hands. I thought it was, pretty interesting. He was like hanging around there. So inspired by your mom.
Yeah. And now, and I've always studied. Well, I didn't study as much. I studied in high school and I studied in college, but then I just kind of flew by the seat of my pants. And then in the last 10 years, I've taken piano lessons. I studied with Ben Cook, who plays for the Pops, an amazing jazz pianist, and Earl Pugh, who was a Berkeley grad in the same class as Gillian Welch and David Rawlings. And so I'm learning to play other stuff from Earl. So it's as a matter of fact, just before this, I was just sitting at the piano playing some jazz stuff that I'm just trying to learn. It's a different language.
Yeah, it's an incredible language. So well-being, how do these things connect? Because I was talking with Mark before you came on that every single culture in the entire world has some form of music. I mean,
Yes,
it's universal. It really is universal. So
there's some debate about that, though, I mean, because it's so different within different cultures. But there's actually in Science Nature, just in the last couple of years, there have been really cool studies on the universality of music. And they posit that our brains are wired for music, just as Noam Chomsky said our brains are wired for language, right? So there's this potential in the brain that's kind of ready to go with it. And there's also some other things that are universal, like the pentatonic scale. I don't know if you've seen that video of Bobby McFerrin in the neuroscience conference. He has this audience, and he shows that they can learn the pentatonic scale, not knowing what it is, but everybody gets it like within a few minutes. And there's also evidence that the minor third is very soothing and is used, and as babies react more favorably to the minor third, which you would think it's sad, but it's kind of universal for mothers and infants. There's a lot of stuff on how music is universal.
Yeah, the pentatonic scale. I can see Mark getting. I can see his face. So, what is it?
The pentatonic scale is do you know the piano, Mark?
Yes.
The pentatonic scale is the black keys.
Okay.
If you played only the black keys, that would be the pentatonic scale.
Got it.
Five notes.
And you know who was an absolute master in that? This through Irving Berlin, because I was just listening about this here. That Irving Berlin is one of the most prolific musicians and composers ever. He taught himself how to play the piano using the black notes and the subtlety.
Really?
Yeah. It was really interesting. So, I mean, certainly on the universality of it and the scales.
Dr. Beresin, I have a question for you. Going into writing this book, you probably had certain thoughts and ideas. What did you learn that you didn't expect to learn while writing this book?
That's a great question. Well, I learned from the narratives. I learned music is especially helpful, I think, in hard times. When one of my best friends, Tony Rothstein's son, took his life by suicide, and wrote a story about what he and Julian shared. And when he listens to the Beatles or other music that they love together, how much it means to him. And there are other. It's really the sad stories that actually meant the most to me about music in hard times. And I think that's probably true. I mean, if you think about chain gangs, if you think about oppression, if you think about how music can kind of bring people together, it's what I learned from these stories was that, I begin the book with a William James quote saying, I don't sing because I'm happy because I sing. Well, that's great. But, frankly, I think music helps us the most when we're sad, when we have loss, when we are faced with hardship and depression.
What is it about music that does that?
I think it affects the brain in a way, and it affects. See, the music. It's interesting. There are some things in the brain that are localized. Speech fluency, speech comprehension are two important ones. Certain parts of the brain that underlie, emotion, impulse, fear, the amygdala. Music uses virtually all parts of the brain. It uses the primitive emotional parts of the brain, our history, the cerebellum that helps us, with balance, also helps us with beat and rhythm, and it uses the left brain in terms of its kind of mathematical making sense kind of aspect, but it uses the right side, which is contextual and woven and integrated, and it all comes together in the orbital frontal cortex, like most things that are integrated. But it involves the entire brain. So I think that's I think that's one of the reasons why it's so powerful.
It's so interesting from an evolutionary point of view. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because we needed to be able to respond to sound in our environment. Right? A rustling in the bush, if we didn't pay attention, it could be a saber-toothed tiger. So we would then store that rustling in the bush in our memory parts of our brain. We'd be able to, retrieve it when needed. Do you think, though, that we have developed this ability to appreciate music more than just about survival? I mean, you talk about happiness and well-being.
I do. I mean, I think, for example, it brings people together. It has symbolic meaning. You remember, I'm sure, the song that was your song with your first girlfriend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sure you had a song, just like, in many weddings, there is the song of the couple. So it brings people together. It also, I think, is instrumental in forming identity.
Wait. Was that a pun? I'm sorry.
It was an unintended pun.
It was a good one, though. It was a good one.
No pun intended. But yeah, I mean, we identify with certain songs. It brings just as kind of, for example, heavy metal, which is not my favorite music, but nihilism, death, destructiveness, expressing existential angst and kind of anger, and it becomes emblematic of who one actually is. And the same is true for rap, which is really derives from the music of Lead Belly and Line and Tracks and Chain Gangs and oppression and freedom from oppression and an expression of outrage, but also that's truly poetic. And Bobby Zimmerman, our poet laureate, Bob Dylan. I mean, the music that he wrote in the 60s that was really fundamentally important, I think, for when I was in college, for the war against the war in Vietnam and women's liberation and the civil rights movement. It was truly important and beautifully crafted. So it has to do with lots of things, but I would say identity and group belonging are two super important things that have evolutionary value. I mean, they keep people together. I mean, what spiritual or religious group doesn't have music, doesn't have call and response, you know, bringing people together. So it's vital. And I think this is all evolutionary, as you were saying, Joe. But I think that it's super important. It's and that's important to me. But I really don't know anyone who doesn't like some form of music.
But some definitely like it more than others. There's no question about that. What is it about what hits somebody versus somebody else? Like you mentioned that heavy metal, right? I too am not a fan, never really understood it, but yet people are fanatical about that.
Oh yeah,
genre of music.
I think again, it's why there's chocolate and vanilla.
Yeah.
I mean, it's why people are different.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful and creative and inspirational to one person may be very, very different to another. I don't know how to answer that other than, like they say about pornography. You know it when you see it, and the same thing is true for music. You know it when you hear it. You know what really grabs you, and you say like, man, what was that?
And you get those goosebumps. I mean, when you hear something that just, no pun intended, strikes a chord. I get goosebumps when I hear certain lyrical parts. And what's that about?
Well, it's physical. It grabs you because it's both physical, it's rhythmic, makes you want to dance, it grabs your emotions. It has meaning. I think it captures so many different things. And there's another thing about it which I think is really super important, and that is that when you're listening to or singing music, you're never alone. So like when you sing in the shower, which just sounds great because bathrooms have such great acoustics, but I mean, you're performing, so you're not alone. So I think it makes you feel with others, even if you're just listening by yourself.
I do admit I love singing opera sometimes in the shower. It becomes a soap opera, really.
Oh my God.
But like you say, even if you're listening alone, you're not alone because the artist who's playing it is with you.
Right.
That's fascinating. And then there's the whole dynamic of live music and how that hits even harder.
Right. Because live music is a collective event. If you're really there with the music, you're there with other people, and everyone is kind of swept away.
Mark, have you been to concerts when you were younger? Did you have a favorite concert that you ever went to?
I love live music. I'll go to live music every single day of the week because it hits me in that way. I've seen a number of performers who have blown me away, but it is amazing that sometimes when you hear a song for the very first time and you've never heard it before, it can move you in a way that is really special because it simply hits you in a way. And it's funny because oftentimes, I would run out the day that a certain artist's new album was released, and it would take a couple listens, right? It doesn't necessarily hit me right away. It was actually the exception to the rule when that one song for the first time where you sit back and say, what was that just hit me? Yeah, music's a very important component to my life, but I haven't really thought so much about the sadness of it. It's definitely a very important part of my life, though.
And sad music, well, when you're sad, music is soothing, it's comforting, but also sad music is powerful. I mean, look at the blues. I mean, right. The blues is also another universal form of music. There's blues in jazz, in rock, in soul, in funk, in Appalachian music, in a cappella music, in gospel music. Just the blues is everywhere, because there's something about the blues and about that aspect of music which is probably more universal than any other genre I can think of.
You started talking about well-being and how important this is for us to have music as a tool for that. And I just want to talk maybe about some of the chapter. So one of them is how music improves well-being. So I think we've spoken a little bit around that, but how does it actually improve well-being?
Well, it hits on the major elements of well-being. So from Seligman's point of view, it involves positive emotions that can come from the blues. His acronym is PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. Positive emotions can come. Engagement, which is applying the skill to challenging tasks. Relationships, we've been talking about how it brings others together for comfort, for support, for a collective, euphoria in concerts. And the meaning, you often remember the first time, you've heard something, but it also has meaning in spiritual groups and families, among friends. So by putting all of those things together, along with the Dalai Lama's concept of well-being, which is I'll quote him. It says, happiness is the key to overall wellness. There are a few things that are necessary to achieve a happy life apart from physical well-being. And these include a happy mind, compassion, trust, friendship, and affection. And music brings that all together.
Yeah, I certainly have had many experiences in my life, because I've been playing piano since I was 7. And I still remember the first song I ever wrote, called Cleopatra's Tune. But it has been such an important part of my life, being able to write music, write songs, being able to, talk about my broken heart so many times, so many broken heart songs, but also then the elation songs where all of a sudden this person is part of your life.
Yeah.
And I think about our national anthems. I mean, I
absolutely
get really moved and stirred when I hear our national anthem. I
well,
find
you know what's so amazing about it. I mean, the Star Spangled Banner is not the greatest tune in the world, but one of the things that's happened in sports events in the last decade is I used to go to sports events. I love going to sports events, and there would always be a band that would play them. Okay. But now it's an individual coming up, singing it a cappella and singing it in a very personalized, unique fashion. And it's so moving.
Mhm.
I am so glad we got away from the band.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
got to the human voice, which is an instrument in itself.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's interesting because I can get sort of choked up and teary just thinking about something that I have heard, some music that I've heard, and how it reminds me of the connectedness that we can have with the world. It's powerful.
Yes.
Powerful.
Yeah.
And then ways to engage with music. That's another chapter heading. So how do we engage with music?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, first of all, these chapters were kind of given to me. The chapter titles were kind of given to me. But then I got the freedom to kind of like write them the way I wanted to.
I see. Okay.
So we can engage with music in a number of ways. There's listening. And I always have music on. I mean, in every there's never silence in my office or in the kitchen. I have speakers in every room in the house. So there's always music. But we can engage by passive listening. We can engage by getting up and moving. We can engage by dancing. We can engage by doing it with others. For example, there is never a holiday in my family where we didn't hang around the piano and sing together. And in fact, I wrote about that in my vignette, because there always came a time when somebody would say, all right, let's do it. And then we would, we'd sit around the piano, or occasionally I'd pick up the guitar and we would all sing. And it didn't matter whether we were in tune or whether the harmonies were like sometimes a little funky, but it was still quite the best time of the night, and so that's a way of engaging. There are plenty of ways of engaging with music.
Well, the Dr. Joe Show crew used to do this when we were live in studio. Mark, you want to tell Gene about what we used to do on Thursday nights?
Yeah, we used to go to the local karaoke bar because that is what we would do. And that's what I was going to say is that the oxytocin when you're getting around the piano and everybody's smiling and participating together? Is that what it is that's flowing?
Well, you obviously know something about the brain and neurochemistry, because oxytocin is the chemical that's released in our brains that connect us.
Yeah.
And it's the glue that connects people together, and it is released in engaging with music, whether it's karaoke or whether it's sitting around the piano or whether it's like playing guitars and singing or whether it's just singing a cappella, but it connects people together. And we human beings are pack animals.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't think there's anything better that connects human beings better and more powerfully than music, even if it's just playing in a drum circle, even if it's not melodic, even if it's just rhythmic, it connects us.
Yeah. It does. It taps into this part of us. We are these pack animals. When we were doing karaoke, we realized that there were three types of people who do karaoke. There was the soloist person who would go up there and just start singing. There was the never alone, would only sing with one person or a group of people. And then honestly, we found the third kind was a person who would rather have root canal without anesthesia than get up and be willing to sing. And we realized it had to do with that vulnerability as well,
Yes.
because really it's with karaoke, when you're up there, you're not a professional singer, but there's that vulnerability. How does being vulnerable just help us in that way, you think, with music?
I think it It's amazing to me. You noticed in the intro, you said I was, consulting to a number of TV shows, and I did a show that actually I wrote the screenplay a little bit for Alan Alda. It was about it's called Brains on Trial, but before the shoot began, he would walk around in circles and circles, and then the producer said to me, don't go over there. He's feeling a little vulnerable. Now, here's a guy who was an icon of performance, who is an absolutely phenomenal communicator, but he would become vulnerable, and the sense of insecurity and anxiety that most performers will tell you they feel. One of my best friends was in the Royal Shakespeare for 25 years. And I would always ask Robert to kind of like, oh, quote me some Shakespeare. And he would refuse until we had enough gin that he would say, oh, okay. I'd say, have a Band of Brothers, and then sure enough, it would come out and it would flow, and it was just amazing. But I think it's that kind of vulnerability. You can't imagine that somebody like Miles Davis or Bill Evans or name your favorite, your performer, but there is a sense of vulnerability because you're exposing yourself when you perform. And whether you make mistakes or not, that's not the issue. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. And when you hear live performances, you don't realize that people are making tons of mistakes until you hear the recording back. And then you say like, oh my God, I missed that one. Well, it's because it zips right by. But the performer is vulnerable, because if you're doing it well, you're exposing the inner self, right? It's not just an act. If it's an act and you're not genuine, it's a flop.
And is that your experience when you're doing Pink Floyd?
Oh my God, I'm a wreck. I mean, yeah, I mean, until I get into it, until I get into it. But usually there's a huge amount of or when they say, piano, take a lead, then there's this kind of moment of kind of like vulnerability and fear and anxiety. But most folks, when they're performing, whether it's in sports or music or giving a lecture, that need to feel a certain amount of anxiety and vulnerability to kind of like get them ready. There's something about the anxiety which can, the fight or flight response, which can get you prepared and fired up or make you run away. And the best performers feel that kind of fear at a level that actually enhances performance.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
Dr. Joe, you had a question about his chapter.
Yeah, it's called Challenges for Engagements in Music, and then how we overcome those challenges. So, Gene, what are the challenges that we're finding now?
Look, if I asked you to learn Chinese, it would be a huge challenge.
Yes.
And learning an instrument is extraordinarily challenging. Learning to sing is extraordinarily challenging. I mean, because at the beginning, you really sound stinky, and you really can't do what you really want to do. You can't play what you want to play. You can't make it sound the way you want it to play. It's frustrating. So I think the biggest challenge, and even somebody like me, who's played for a very long time, to learn jazz, to learn, this gets a little technical, that you don't build a chord on the root and the fifth, you build it on the third and the seventh.
Mhm.
That is, it's like turning it inside out. If you play the guitar and you do finger picking style guitar like I do, but then you learn to play the banjo or the dobro, you have to pick inside out, because banjo rolls are the inverse of playing Delta or Piedmont style finger picking. So learning something new, especially the older you get, is incredibly challenging. It's no doubt that it's even challenging to kids. I mean, why is it that so many kids say, gee, I wish I stuck with the piano, or I wish I stuck with the guitar, or I wish I stuck with the violin, or, I shouldn't have given it up. I think the biggest challenge is to learn something new and to not appreciate how long it's going to take you to get there.
Well, especially for, if everything's about immediate gratification, you got to think long term with that, which is a whole different part of your brain.
Or if you're comparing yourself, for example, for me to kind of like, play chords like Bill Evans. I mean, we all have our idols, we all have our, to write poetry like Bob Dylan, there's no, it's the icons that we have in music, to me, are just so inspirational and so unachievable for a good reason. But I think the challenge is really to get to the point where it doesn't matter, where I really don't want to or can't be like Bill Evans or Oscar Peterson or any one of my favorite musicians, because I can learn to play good enough, to quote Winnicott, to feel good. Yeah, and that's a challenge.
And to be you, though, Gene. I mean, to play your music the way you play it in your style. This is certainly something that my kids have learned too. Is they just love music. They just love that feeling about it that you get.
Yeah.
And then being able to create that. And I mean, we have remarkable music therapists. Kathleen Howland has been a guest on our show. I know that you know her. Incredible music therapist. And the application of music to so many things that we have in our behavioral health field now.
Yeah.
Is that one of the challenges, or is there resistance to that? The idea of music therapy and how we can use it to help others?
I think there's resistance. Well, as a shrink, there's resistance to all forms of therapy that aren't kind of considered scientific. I think that music, like art, like creative arts of all sorts, when applied to medicine, that can't be proven in randomized controlled trials and can't be proven quantitatively, are looked upon by many with skepticism. But nonetheless, the creative arts are extraordinarily healing.
Mm-hmm.
They're healing.
Yeah.
There's more to medicine than just as one of my teachers told me when I was a medical student, the only cures in medicine are antibiotics and surgery. Mm-hmm. And that may be true. Everything else is maintenance. Well, we're not meant to cure. As doctors, I think our primary goal is to heal. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the essences of healing is the use of creative arts.
Yeah. Yeah, and being able to help someone recognize their value. I think that for me, what I have found is that every single person who's come to me on some level has felt less valuable. And we have an opportunity to remind them of their inner music, that music that is them, unique to them, that value that they have. And I truly believe that that is one of the great gifts that you, Gene, have given me as my mentor. Because I want to just give Gene the real credit. We worked together, but he was my teacher, and I've always appreciated that, and how you've helped so many people.
Well, you know what they say. What my mentor, one of my mentors, Ned Castum, told me: you can't make silk out of a sow's ear unless you have a silk sow. And Joe, I got to tell you, you're a silk sow.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll try to figure out exactly what that means at another point, but I do appreciate it. I feel that way. With that in mind, one of the things that we worked on is the I am approach, the idea that we're always doing the best we can, but influenced by the 4 domains: your home domain, the social domain, the biological domain of your brain and body, and what I call the I see. How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? Because these domains interact, a small change can have a big effect. We don't need to change everything. So, Gene, given what we're talking about tonight, what small change can you recommend to our listeners?
Listen to some music that you have not heard before. Listen to something completely different. I mean, we tend to gravitate towards sameness and similarity. It's familiar, but listen to something completely different. And it's one of the advantages of say Spotify. But I could list a number of things that I'm sure people haven't heard about. But listen to something that you really have never encountered before, and see how it grabs you. And then if that doesn't grab you, try something else that's different.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Yeah, we'll try that today. The second truth of the I am. Everyone is interested in what you think or feel about them, which has an effect on their biological domain, because it feels different when you feel respected or disrespected. And you're part of someone's home or social domain. So what this means is you control no one, you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Professor Eugene Beresin, what kind of influence do you want to be?
I want to try to influence others to be themselves, but also I want them to live like Parker Palmer, who was briefly a mentor of mine, who's a wonderful sociologist, teacher, Quaker, who wrote The Courage to Teach, talks about life on the Mobius strip. If you take a piece of paper and you bend it in a certain direction, the inside and the outside are continuous. Mm-hmm. And if I could help people, if I could help anyone bring the inside and the outside together, that would be a great achievement and a great way of influencing them.
It's wonderful. And you have in so many ways. How do we find the book? How do we find music?
Well, the distributor is making a deal with the publishing company, so it's pretty hard to get right now. It's on Amazon. If you just go to music and then Beresin, it'll eventually come into stock. I don't think there's a way to order it right now. You can go to Emerald Books and read the first chapter and the endorsements, but they're telling me within the next week or two you'll be able to order it.
It's great. And folks, I was very lucky. I wrote to Emerald telling them I was going to have Dr. Beresin on the show, and they did send me an advance copy. So I got a chance to read the whole thing, and it is brilliant. I truly, truly appreciate the work that you've been doing. Dr. Beresin, thanks so much for being here tonight. And folks, grab a copy of music. It will change your life. Mark, we'll see you next week.
See you. Thank you, Dr. Beresin.
Thank you all.